Most people would be thrilled that I've muted myself. Uh, Thank you for having me, and again for a discussion. Um, I'm going to have to leave in about a half an hour, so hopefully there'll be time. I'll be able to participate in some questions and answers. Look, I'm speaking from Palestine, Israel, from Jerusalem, uh, and I'm a member of a Palestinian-led organization of a few years old called the One Democratic State Campaign. And I think the student protests that have broken out in the United States and then spread to Europe and other parts of the world, they were huge student protests beginning in Egypt that were suppressed by the government and so on, um, have been tremendously important in terms of the solidarity, of course, with the Palestinians, but also really I think in a couple other ways as well. First of all, it's, as was said before, governments work on a very transactional basis. And what concerns us as the public, which is justice and human rights and international law and peace and all of that, are really almost ridiculous for them. I mean, they certainly don't figure into their policy making. And I think what the student protests have done was to really put governments on notice that, you know what, you can go ahead with your transactional politics, but we the people, and we the people also vote, and we also have other forms of leverage and clout. We the people are not going to surrender to your transactional policies. You're going to pay a price. I mean, Biden could very well not get elected because of his policies on Gaza and Palestine. So I think from the point of view, and to sort of reinforce what Michael was saying, from the point of view of strengthening the the position of international law and human rights in terms of international politics, I think these protests have really shown that they do reach into the public and that the public is able to rise up. Also, another, I think, important thing about the protests is that they've been intersectional, as a key word for the young generation. And that is that, I've written before about what I call global Palestine. That in many ways, Palestine is kind of a microcosm of wider global North, global South politics, of anti-war movement, of militarization, and other things. And I think the protests have really brought out how much Palestine links up with all kinds of other movements. So it's going beyond Palestine. Palestine, I think, is the center and the hub, as it should be, but it's certainly a catalyst to other things. My only concern is there's a certain disconnect between there's a disconnect between the protests and what's happening actually here in Palestine. The protests are crucial. The solidarity is important. The demands are important for divestment, for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, of course. But in the end, the liberation of Palestine is not going to come from these protests. There has to be more of a Palestinian leadership and a Palestinian direction. In other words, what the protesters are sort of telling us is, look, mobilize us, use us for advancing the liberation process in Palestine. But in a way, there's no reaction from the Palestinian side here, partly because, and this is not criticism, this is explaining, because of the suppression that Palestinian activists here face. Any Palestinian that emerges as a leader from the age of 13 is going to be jailed or killed. So that the suppression is very real, both on the part of Israel and on the part of the Palestinian Authority. So that it's very difficult, but nonetheless, the One Democratic State campaign that I'm a part of is so far the only group that has really taken the one state idea that we believe is the only political option today. I mean, the two-state solution never was, if you put it within a settler colonial context. And at the same time, it's impossible, and it's only another form of apartheid. It's two-state apartheid. So the one democratic state idea is really the only political option. So at some point, I think we have to try to link up, even though it's very incipient political program and movement we have now. We have to try to link up our political initiative of advancing the idea of one democratic state, which is again is a Palestinian-led program that very much in many ways goes back to the original PLO idea in its 1968 charter and the protests, so that we're not strong enough at this point to lead the protest. There isn't that strong enough Palestinian voice. But I think for people that are interested in advancing this politically, to help amplify our voice here, there has to be more of an amplification of Palestinian voices in Palestine that I don't think are heard enough in order to give more direction and more focus to the protests and to help sustain them. And in a way to add to divestment and ceasefire, political demands, I think that are really important. So I'll leave it at that and
Thank you
wait for
so
questions and answers.